Right. Okay. Thank you everybody for coming for the Planning and Highways meeting today, the 11th of January. I'm not going to read through all this. I think we all know what to do and where to go in case there's an emergency or anything. But I will remind you to put your phones on silent or off. Thank you. Item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence. I've got Councillor Olivia Honeyman and substitute Councillor Wearmouth. Thank you for subbing. And Councillor Clay.
Yes, they're the two apologies that I've received.
Okay. Item 2, disclosure of interest. To deal with any disclosure by members of any disclosure of pecuniary interests as interests other than pecuniary interests, as defined under the Seaford Town Council Code of Conduct and Localism Act 2011 in relations to matters on the agenda. Councillor Martwell.
I am aware and know the people in 7 Belvedere Gardens.
I haven't got a spare pen, I'm sorry. I've been, having spent all my time downstairs, I've had time to...
Spare pen.
I've got one, thanks, yeah.
So I might abstain, I suppose.
Yeah, so just don't participate or vote. Yeah, okay, you feel more comfortable with that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So that's application...
Belvedere Gardens.
Right, fine, thank you.
0702.
Thank you.
Okay. No public participation, so that leads us on to planning applications. Planning applications received week commencing the 18th of December. LW/23/0783, Blind Court, 48 Dane Road. Prior approval of application for 2 additional stories to provide 4 additional flats. Who would like to lead on this one? Councillor Buchanan.
Thank you, Chair. Just reading through the letters from citizens. Apparently there was an application for a house rejected, but more to the point perhaps, in amongst all the objections to about parking and stuff like that. This would be a 5-storey building without a lift. And whilst apparently, to my understanding, there's no statutory requirement, there are very strong guidelines. And anything over 2 stories above, so 1, 2, 3 stories, the 4th, 5th story you'd have to have a lift for those stories.
Thank you. Councillor Markwell first, then.
Well, I've read a lot of the comments from the local people, as well as looking at the plans as they stand, and quite clearly the building levels in Dane Road, this building totally exceeds that natural skyline. So it's it will become quite an obtrusive building. And also, given that we know this particular group of flats is directly pretty much opposite Morrison's, there is very limited parking outside Morrison's and very limited parking on the other side of the road where these flats are. So it would not encourage, it's going to be quite a problem for people, I think, parking anywhere close to the property. So parking could be quite an issue. And so those are kind of 2 things. I'm not so sure about the light, but I should imagine that there will be impositions, certainly on the buildings on the one side. That there was a complaint about light, but that's more difficult, to understand. But I think that definitely the height and the the total nature of the application seems to be totally out of keeping with the buildings that are in Tame Road at the moment.
Councillor Honeyman, and then
I mean, I understand it is permitted development, but they've had, that's what they're claiming, but we had a lot of opposition, so it had to go to planning anyway. But it is permitted development on the surface, isn't it?
Yeah, it's if I could explain, it's like a sort of halfway house procedure between permitted development without any conditions, the sort of small extension type procedure, and the full application. It arose a couple of years ago when the government wanted to encourage more residential units to be provided without using green or brownfield land, therefore going up instead of anything else. And it's what the rules are, that it requires an express procedure, if you like, of prior approval, which is they put the plans in. They don't have to put full plans in, just basic plans to show, like they have here, the elevations. And the local authority has 56 days in which to require a full application. And you can only require a full application on certain grounds. And the main grounds are external appearance, loss of privacy, loss of light, but not traffic.
That's right.
But that doesn't necessarily stop us raising an objection on increased traffic if members want to. But the basic grounds which local authority can use to require a full application and not allow it to go through under this sort of express procedure is that its external appearance is harmful to the area, and I think that really goes for the look of the building itself in isolation, and it is not attractive, but also especially what Councillor Markwell was saying about the fact that it doesn't is not sympathetic to the scale and the character and height of the surrounding buildings, therefore would stick out like an unwanted protuberance or sore thumb or whatever you like to call it. So it's quite a complicated procedural thing. As I say, it's a halfway house. It's cropped up a couple of times before on increase to height in houses in Bishopstone. I'm sure, but this is the first one I think outside Bishopstone. And I think the local authority has been quite successful in resisting inappropriate developments under this procedure. But this is another one really. It's not really appropriate, and it's unattractive in itself in isolation, I think, and certainly doesn't. It's not sympathetic with the scale of the surrounding buildings. And let's say the traffic aspect of it, obviously, is something which neighbouring residents are sensitive about. But it's not a main ground which you can, which the local authority can use to resist it.
So can I just come back? I'm quite finished, obviously.
Sorry.
That's fine. But yes, obviously, I think it would be more acceptable if it was just a one level on top. Then it would get it to the right similar height to the neighbouring side. But the two is too much, and I agree with the town centre site. You can't really go on the parking because there's limited parking anyway. So it's going to be, the weighting on parking is limited. It is more the overbearing side, isn't it, and the scale more than anything, I would say. But then the traffic side is not really so much of an issue because you can have it anyway, aren't you?
Yeah.
So.
Councillor Werner.
I think I'm just, Councillor Honeyman has said it for me. I think it would just look ugly and inappropriate. I used to live down there, and you have to have sort of symmetry on both sides, and it would stick out like a sore thumb. And I think it would really, really spoil the look of the walk down towards the beach.
Councillor Baldwin, because she hasn't spoken yet.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with all councillors' comments along here. It is overdevelopment for the area, and it is out of keeping with the street scene. The entire street, our 3 stories houses, blocks of flats, but they're all 3 stories. They're all along the same height, roughly. So putting another 2 stories is too much out of place and out of character for that area.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, totally agree. Councillor Buchanan, did you want to come back?
Yes, thank you. I was just wondering, the lift issue.
Yeah.
What did you know what how the planning works for that? Because as it stands as a 3-storey building, that with no lift, I think that would be fine. If you add a single or a double on top of that, that then exceeds the recommended heights for buildings with no lifts.
I'm not sure about lifts, but what comes to mind is means of escape.
Means of escape, I think, is probably okay, provided that the stairwell should be via.
I'm not sure whether there's a requirement for a lift, because it may be that they leave the question of a lift to the developer on the basis that a lift is a sort of an extra, which most developers would want to put in. But if the developer doesn't want the expense of putting in a lift, then he takes the risk of selling it without the lift. I'm not sure that it's a statutory requirement in the same way as
statutory, but it's a very strong guideline.
Well, yes, it's. I mean, regulatory guideline. I don't think you can use it in planning terms, though. I think it's just a question of it makes it less attractive to a buyer.
It finished me off.
Yeah, well, but if it's for young people, then young people might like the exercise of running up and down stairs. I'm not being flippant or anything, but I think it's a sort of an extra, and I don't think you can really use it as a planning argument.
Place you buy if you don't want Granny to visit.
Okay. All right. I think we've all sort of more or less agreeable on this first. So can I have a proposer to object to this application? Thank you, Councillor Boardman. Seconded by Councillor Marwell. On the grounds of...
Yes, it's an obtrusive building. It's too high and overbearing. It's 2 stories. It will be 2 stories higher than the building surrounding it. Therefore, it will be out of keeping and appear over dominant in the street scene. Those sort of issues that I can turn into an objection for Lewis to look over.
Is everybody happy with that?
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
There's no need to refer to the traffic.
It's not relevant.
So do we concentrate on the building itself?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so can I have a show of hands of objecting to this application?
That's objection unanimously passed. Thank you.
LW/23/0656 Highwood, 51 Furl Road, variation of condition 1 approved plans in relation to approval LW/19/0426 to amend design of proposed dwelling, including alterations to fenestration at all elevations, increase garage size, infill front porch bay, open external porch, change cladding material at ground floor level to brick and first floor gable to timber and render, with internal layout changes and associated works. Who would like to lead on this one? Councillor Honeyman?
Thank you, Chair. I think the resident, they'll be able to change their mind for certain things. They either can't get the materials or they've decided they want to change the colour scheme and just vary it a bit. I personally don't like the changes, but that's just personal taste, I think, more than anything. I'm trying to work out, we can't object to it, but I don't really think, we possibly could in certain aspects, but I think we just have to accept it, really.
It is difficult to object to because it's on the same footprint.
Yeah.
So the principle of having this size of house on this size of plot has been confirmed after the 2019 application have been approved. So this is, as I say, quite significant alterations to the design in as far as materials, but not really significant as far as the footprint's concerned. So it's cosmetic in a way, and not really a lot of scope to raise any objections.
But the garage is a bit bigger, isn't it? I noticed
Yeah,
that.
yeah. But nothing, although it's in an area of established character, it's still difficult to raise any objections because it's just especially as the previous design is, the plan of it is not really, doesn't really give you a full idea of nature of it. That's the existing design and that's the proposed. They obviously have put more effort into the proposed design plans than the existing ones. But as I say, if you look at, the main thing is to look at the footprint and it's the same. So.
Councillor Foreman?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In some ways I agree with Councillor Honeyman. There's aspects of it that I actually kind of don't like, but I can understand that you can't really vote against it on some of the things because it is cosmetic.
Yeah.
But some things make it look better than what it seemed to before. The only thing I don't like is that rear dormer window at the back. It's now off centre, and but then because it's at the rear of the property, is it actually something we can then object to because it is at the rear of the property, but it is off centre, and in our design guidelines does say that it should kind of form some symmetry or be above windows below, and that's the only thing I could think of to object to it.
Yeah, the rear is much less sensitive than the front. It's just how it goes, because it just has less impact on the area. But yes, that's a point. It's, in a way, it's spot the difference, isn't it?
I did.
Yeah. But I'd say there's very little really very little grounds to object to it.
Yeah. Okay, anybody else? No? So, can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Buchanan to support this application,
I'll second it.
and seconded by Councillor Werner. And can I have a show of hands, please?
That's supported NEMCOM.
Oh, you're abstaining.
Abstain.
Right.
Thank you. Right. LW stroke 23 stroke 0774, 7 Lady Cross Close, replacement single storey rear extension, addition of 10 solar panels to existing rear roof and alterations to fenestration. I'd like to lead on this one. Councillor Borman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Usually when you see replacement of single-storey rear extension, it's exactly the same footprint near enough, but this was like 3 to 4 times the size of what they're replacing, but the garden can take it. It doesn't seem that it's going to be too big for the property or the area, so I'm actually quite happy to support it.
Yeah, I'll show you the block plan so you can see how the footprint is enlarged. That's it's in a way the most important plan, because the proposed elevation doesn't give you an idea of the depth much. But that's the new footprint, and the pink is the old footprint. So it is relatively large rear extension, but it won't impinge too much on the properties either side. The gardens are pretty shallow anyway, but it still leaves relatively. And as said before, the impact of rear extensions is always less than the impact of front extensions, which is why they're subject to different rules. So, but yes, it's quite significant, but if you look at the layout of the area, it doesn't cause too much harm.
No.
There seems to be, show chair, round the corner there's somebody that's already done quite a large extension. On the next one, Jeff, to the right, round the corner.
What and Lady Cross Close?
Yeah. No, on the corner, literally.
Oh, that one there.
One, yeah.
Sorry, yeah, that field. See, that's a much larger plot, but it does project that block more. It doesn't leave much garden here, but that's in a way a question of personal taste.
Yeah.
It doesn't take up too much of the garden, but it looks relatively well designed, and with solar panels as well, so which is a bonus.
Yeah, and cladding, isn't it? Yeah. Any other comments? Right, so can I have a proposer, are we going to support this application? Thank you, Councillor Foreman, and seconded by Councillor Markwell. And can I have a show of hands, please? Thank you.
That's supported unanimously, thank you.
Solar panels as well.
And some panels.
Applications received week commencing the 25th of December. LW/23/0782, 7 Belvedere Gardens. Single storey rear side infill extension, installation of a rear pergola and addition of roof line on existing flat roof. Let's lead on this one. Councillor Honeyman?
I was quite happy with it. What I didn't like was it goes so close to the boundaries of next door. So it was quite a big infill in a way, but it's at the back. And I can see why they're doing it, because you get the south facing side. I think it'd be hard to object.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
from
the
the look
garage
at,
is on the boundary, isn't
Yeah.
it?
from the look at the block plan that shows what Councillor Honeyman has just referred to, similar to the previous application, it's gives you an idea of exactly where it is and how large it is. Yeah, there we are. So it is it doesn't project into the rear garden at all. Obviously it's close to that gap there, but it won't cause any loss of privacy. There'd be no objection obviously from that property. So it's, as I say, it's what it says, an infill.
Yeah. Okay, any other comments? Do I have a proposer to support this application? Thank you, Councillor Honeyman. Seconded by Councillor Wormer. And can I have a show of hands, please?
That's unanimously supported with Councillor Markwell not speaking or voting.
That's right, yeah.
Thank you.
LW/23/0717, Windy Gap, Marine Parade, variation of condition 1 of the plans relating to approval LW/19/0834, changes to site layout. And I think it's just basically the landscaping.
This is the layout of the garden. We don't usually get
I was going to say, well,
consulted.
I was surprised that they seem to engage.
I was notified. I always put on the applications that we're specifically notified of, because I find that Lewis usually fishes out the very minor alterations to conditions, which are sort of admin applications rather than actual planning applications. But this one has slipped through, and as I was notified of it, I put it on the agenda. But looking at the detail of it, it would usually be dealt with by the officers as an admin exercise, because it's not really significantly different to what was approved. It's a different layout for the garden, different planting of different species. It may be that they decided that certain species that they put into the original plan wouldn't thrive in that particular environment. And the objection that there's been lodged is from the representative of one of the vendors off plan of the flats, who objects mainly because what's being proposed is different to what was on the original plan. He's quite entitled to do that, but it's more of a private matter between him and the developers and vendors, because it doesn't really affect the planning aspects of it. How they choose to lay the garden out within reason is up to them, and this isn't too different. It's different, but it's not significantly different to warrant any sort of objection, I would suggest anyway. But we can have a look at the plans and compare the two gardens. But they're both gardens. They're just laid out differently with different species. And one's got the proposed revision has got a pond in it, which
That's the old one, I think, with the pond.
I thought it was the new one.
That's the original.
Oh, is
one,
it? Is
yeah.
that something check?
Yeah, because there's a revision.
Oh, yeah.
Revision K is the latest
Yeah, this
revision,
is. I've just put up the old one.
which is
That's the
revision
new
I.
That's the old one.
That's the old one.
Yeah. As that was. It said existing, previously approved, and this is proposed. And we'll try and compare the two. Going from one to the other. If I get them in the same sort of. Yeah, they're in the same direction. This obviously is the main garden. That's the pond. This was. Yes. Yeah, you're right. Sorry, I thought
That's
the pond.
revision I is
The pond was in the one that was approved initially, and this is the one that's up for approval now. Normally it would be the officers as an admin exercise comparing one to the other and saying, well, this is just a different version of what we were looking for, and approve it. But it's slipped through the net and has been notified to us. But we can't really see. I can't really see any major difference between the two, as far as providing. You know, the whole idea is to provide a landscaped area. And both schemes achieve that. This is car parking, so we're talking about that area and the areas around the green areas, as opposed to the existing ones which they want to change, which has less of a buffer on the existing ones around here, and well, roughly the same over here, but with a pond added there. So as I say, I don't think there's really any scope for commenting or objecting, but you may think differently.
Councillor Bond.
Thank you. I think in some ways the revised plans are better, because if you look at the car parking area, they're now wanting to use permeable tarmac. They're also, the car booth that they've got there is actually with a grass covered roof. They're actually putting more things in which are more beneficial than what they had before. So yes, the landscaping's slightly different, and I can understand maybe the resident that thought that what they were getting was something and now it's changed, but actually in some ways some of the other things they're putting in is going to be better.
Yeah.
And that's a hard area there, which is sometimes more useful for enjoying gardens than having more of a grassed area. It's up to them to decide really, and that's a pergola. So it's yes, you could say it's an improvement. It's a question of taste really.
Okay. Councillor Hartnell.
Yeah, I was just a bit sympathetic towards the comments from the residents who bought into the area with an expectation and thought, obviously, felt that the contractors should carry out their original plan and had not appreciated that they could change it. I guess that's what the small, the small print's about, really, isn't it? It's not recognising that it was within the contractor's gift to be able to do that, which was obviously frustrating, because I think that's kind of the niggle that the particular resident that brought this through, and I'm not quite sure how.
I think there's probably an arbitration procedure built into that sort of transaction, maybe operated by the NHBC or something like that. To settle matters like that. You can't really be settled through a planning application. It's really a private matter, and it's just a thought. There could be an arbitration sort of procedure where an independent arbitrator could rule whether there's been a significant breach of contract and whether there should be a sort of small payment to compensate for that, or whether there's no real difference, you know.
But are we able to make a recommendation for it to go to be
I think-
considered like that or not?
I don't think it's really within our scope to do
Okay.
that. No. I mean, it's more of a private matter, like covenants would be
Okay.
between an owner and a tenant, if you like, and it's not really a planning issue.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, just a quick one, if it's all right. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's not affecting the seafront scene in that respect either. So that, Richard, obviously when we first looked at this, that's what we were concerned with, one of the issues, wasn't it, when it did come to us. So it's just rearranging a few bits and pieces around the actual site, but the bulk of it's the same really, isn't
It
it?
is, yeah.
So
And you could say it's an improvement. You know, they might have looked at the original one and say, oh, we can improve on that without really spending more money on it, you know, make it more attractive for vendors,
Yeah.
potential purchasers. It's just that this person bought it off the plan and it was different. You know, it's a risk you take sometimes when you
Yeah.
buy things off plan.
Okay. So we're going to have a proposal that we support this application. Councillor Bournemouth, a seconder. Councillor Buchanan, and a show of hands, please.
That's supported unanimously, thank you.
Right, well, there's no applications on week commencing the 1st of January, and no tree works, and so that leads us on to agenda item 5, the Lewis local plan. And we'll refer back to your...
You remember the last meeting, I sort of introduced the local plan consultation. There's no real detail in the current consultation plan. It's more as to how they propose to set out the spatial policy of, you know, how many houses should go in which locations prior to actual allocations of land and sites coming in the next draft plan, which will be after the consultation on this plan is carried out, probably early summer this year. There'll be a draft plan with the allocations in, which people and members can, if you like, get to grips with, because that'll be the real plan. This is more of a final preliminary plan. It's a strategic plan which sets out how they see, for example, housing sites being allocated, the number of houses being supplied and where those houses should be supplied. For example, it cuts out the option of a new settlement, which could be a possible option because of the need to find X hundred houses per year over the course of about the next 20 years. Lewis are still saying that because of the restrictions in the district, because of the national park taking up over half of the space of the district, and the two main towns, the two seaside towns, being restricted by the national park boundaries, as you know, Seaford is particularly, and by the sea. In fact, you can't spread out 4 ways. Well, you could, but it would be difficult. And the flood problems in Seaford as well, and possibly New Haven. I'm not sure, but there are restraints which have always meant over the last 20 or 25 years that Lewis hasn't been able to achieve the housing delivery requirement which has been set by the government based on housing need in the area. It's just something that they've found impossible to do, and on average they've only managed to find 3 years rolling supply when the requirement is to have 5 years rolling supply of sites available. So it meant that there's been a lot of windfall development, a lot of speculative development, especially in the settlements in the area of the district, the rural areas of the district, which are not designated national park. For example, Chailey area is under pressure, and the Ringmer area is under pressure. and in Seaford it's meant it being very difficult to resist windfall developments, which obviously come into the equation as well. I mean, Newlands strangely was a windfall development because it came after the first local plan but before the second one. It's just the way that it was timed. But there's been other substantial windfall developments. Well, the Constitutional Club is an example, providing quite a number of units towards the delivery requirement but not being an allocation in the plan. I put this on the agenda because there's quite a bit of documentation to read on the local plan, and it takes quite a while to get through it. 203-page main document plus all the appendices. I was proposing to answer any queries about the plan tonight, but to do the main report for the next meeting on February the 1st, when there will be residents here. The residents who came tonight were very concerned that the the lands north of Southfield Barn,
Yeah.
there will be another attempt to allocate that
That's very sensitive
after the
about
first
that.
the first attempt to develop it with, I think, 40 houses came just before I joined the council in 2016. It was sort of dealt with through 2015 and 2016. I just missed it because I think the application was withdrawn just before I joined. But I was aware of it, obviously. They're very aware that it could be reallocated under the local plan. But at the moment, there's no allocation. There's no allocations in the plan at all. That will come at the next stage. This is just really just to explain how and where they propose to put additional housing, what form that additional housing should take. For example, it should be 40%, should be an emphasis on provision of affordable housing, as well as the other policies they hope to put in regarding climate change, etc., etc. But obviously the housing policies are the meat of the plan. So I will do a report bringing out the major issues as I see them, and indicating which way you might go on them in your response to the consultations. But also because this specific site at Chington Lane, Chington
Way.
Chington Way.
Sorry. Chington Way has been highlighted again. The three people who are here tonight who want to address the committee on that, although there's no allocations in the plan, I've suggested that they come back at the next meeting on the 1st, when we will formulate our formal response to the local plan, because the closing date is February the 8th. I'm quite happy I'm able to sort of get the response done in that week before February the 8th. So as I say, I'll do a detailed plan, a detailed report in the next few weeks. And because it's good that some residents have shown an interest in this, even though in a way they're jumping the gun because there's been no specific allocations, I've invited them back to that meeting so that they can address the committee on their concerns. And I will mention it in the report as well, because it is a pretty obvious site where we suspected that the owner would attempt again in this process to get the site allocated. I think there's plenty of ammunition to use against it now, particularly as the national park has become well established. Back in 2015 there was no national park plan. The national park had only been designated for 3 or 4 years. They hadn't really got going. They didn't really get going with full weight until they had their own local plan, which was in 2019. Now they're a force to be reckoned with. They've been in existence for 12, 13 years, and they're a very strong, well-resourced authority. And I'm sure that they would have just as much opposition to this site being developed as the residents and the town council and the district council. But there's no harm in getting your retaliation in first, if you like.
Yeah.
although there's no allocations, we want to make it clear in an early stage that the residents and the town council would be against this allocation. Well, I mean, subject to what you decide at the meeting.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question for you, Chair? The Seaford planning boundary, who has the right to change that?
It can be changed by Lewis in the local plan, but the neighbourhood plans also, the neighbourhood plan review, I've started discussions with LDC. There's a designated officer who deals with neighbourhood plans, and I'm going to have a meeting with him, because as the local plan gets towards its final stages, which should be in about a year's time, we need to review the neighbourhood plan in line with the local plan, so it stays sort of subservient but matching the local plan, if you like. Like, one thing is obviously to change the allocations to whatever allocations are agreed, subject to us agreeing them, obviously. So
I mean, the reason why I asked the question as well is because if the Coggett Road does, if SHB ever did get, if the Seaford barn did ever get redeveloped to whatever capacity, because there's all sorts of options may or may not happen, that Coggett Road couldn't stay as it is. That's obvious, isn't it? So would that impact always, you often get one issue kind of.
You mean it would need to be widened?
Well, I don't think you couldn't do what maybe could happen on the Southfield barn and keep the existing road.
You might be able to have passing places, as it's quite a relatively short distance. But yes, I appreciate that.
And the base of
the use of South Hill Barn for the sort of community is an obvious benefit to the national park and to the town, and it brings people. It achieves the second purpose of a national park, which is to bring people in to promote cultural and recreational activities within the area, which is different to an area of outstanding natural beauty, because there the objective is just to retain the character of the area, but in the national park they want to. The motive is to retain the character of the area and the beauty of the area, but also to bring people into the area for recreational and cultural activities, and that's what we're trying to do with South Hill Barn. And as I say, I don't know about the highways aspects of it. I haven't been involved in the detail, but yes, I don't think. I mean, the development of South Hill Barn would be an asset to the national park. You know, that's what we would argue, in line with its objectives, statutory objectives back in the 1949 Act. But the question of housing on that adjacent site is a different issue altogether. But yes, are you saying we wouldn't want to improve the road up to Southfield Barn?
No, you may not be able to get SHB sorted out unless you did improve that concrete
I don't
road.
think it's necessary to improve that road. I mean,
to put some passing places in might be
a lot of it might depend on funding issues.
That's right.
It's funding partly, it's sustainability and all that goes with it. It's not straightforward. SHB is not a straightforward project anyway.
No. I mean, but they're starting on. There's a project team, and they're going to meet a few times through the year.
No, I'm on the committee for it. So Councillor Waldo as well.
I think there's sort of 4 meetings planned, isn't there? But as I say, we'll leave that to one side because that's still under consideration. But as far as I will put in a piece in the report about this opposition to the allocation of that site for housing, and it'll tie in with the people who want to come along, and I think we want to encourage people to come along and state their case, even if it's regarding a piece of land which is not really part of the local plan yet. It's still, the possibilities are there, and I don't blame them for wanting to come along and address the committee on it. So, but that's for next time. But in the meantime, I recommend members to keep looking at the papers. It's not exactly the most entertaining bedtime reading that you'll ever have, because it's written in the usual sort of obscure language. But they do try and put it. They do try and put it into plain English, but it's not quite achievable.
It's just sort of bits at the time, isn't it?
Yeah,
Really, rather
so
than trying to get through
You've
a
got
lot.
a bit more time to try and sort of get some sense out of the documents, as I will try. And there'll be a report available in a couple of weeks' time when the agenda's circulated, and I'll send that report to the objector that came in tonight, and at least we'll have some sort of discussion and interest shown from the residents at that time.
Councillor Martha?
Yeah, thanks very much, Jeff, for that explanation. I think one of the things that probably is most useful in the explanations that we or you write and send back to the residents is the process that we undertake for making decisions.
Yeah.
Because I think often, as we were saying today, people think it's a decision-making something when it isn't, but they'll probably want to know, so what happens, you know, when we make decisions about things on the 1st of February, or where does it go then, and what, you know, so it's quite useful to be able to just explain and reiterate the process to people that these documents go through. Also, because I think it's probably quite helpful to remind ourselves as well. But because it is confusing, undoubtedly, and they are hefty documents. And because they're so voluminous, it makes people think it's a done deal, because why would you write all that if it wasn't, kind of thing. So people's perception of the document and the size of it is possibly makes them think that this is all being put together without the consultation that it still requires. So maybe just a few words about the process and how we make the decisions would be helpful.
Yes.
Because you kind of know it.
Well, yeah. The problem is it's a funny stage of the plan. There haven't been, as far as I know, there haven't been any public exhibitions. It's been difficult anyway because of Christmas and New Year intervening. They've made the consultation period a bit longer, but they haven't really made an effort to explain what it's about, other than in providing online seminars. And I think they're available online. You know, they're an hour long. I wouldn't recommend maybe staying with it for the whole hour. But, you know, they're the nearest thing we've got to a sort of public exhibitions where you can go along and ask questions. Because I think they think that the time for that will be the next stage, when there's much more flesh on the bone, if you like, to deal with, because there'll be allocations and specific policies. This is more strategic. And so they probably thought, well, we'll do it online in view of the time of the year that I suppose they have no control over the time of the year, because that's just the way the programme goes. So, but that's what the objectors were complaining about. So that's why I've invited them along to the meeting next time, obviously, one of the reasons anyway. But I do recommend having a look at maybe one of the online seminars, because the officer dealing with it is quite good in his presentation, and you know, that might help in sort of getting over the ideas that they're trying to put over, the strategic ideas, rather than just reading the plain text, which is a bit obscure in places.
Any other questions? So can I have a show of hands of noting the report? Thank you. That's it. Wrong agenda.
Oh yes.
Agenda item 6. To inform members of the recent amendments to the National Planning Policy Framework.
Yeah, this is something we've been waiting for about 9 months or so. There was a consultation exercise this time last year, which I think commenced in 22nd of December and went on till March. It's in the consultation and the amendments intended to, if you like, soften some of the harder edges of National Planning Policy Framework. And it was in response to a rebellion in Parliament by 50 MPs from the South East, who were becoming increasingly angry at the allocation of greenfield sites in the home counties especially, and metropolitan greenbelt being nibbled, if you like, by new developments, and it was a political rebellion, so a sort of aesthetic rebellion against the concreting over of the countryside, and the government relented and said that they would soften the impact of the need for more housing and the need to provide 300,000 houses per year, which is the target, by amending the National Planning Policy Framework. And this is the result of that. And it was announced by Michael Gove as the Minister responsible on Monday the 19th, and that's when these provisions came into effect. As it states, it doesn't really affect authorities like Lewes, who have had really permanent problems in achieving the sort of housing delivery which the government have required. That's, I think, both governments, both the post-2010 and even pre-2010, they found it difficult to achieve the requirements, and have always been subject to penalties and vulnerable to speculative development. But there are aspects of the new framework which are helpful. Generally, it's intended to speed up the local plan process because the government, they want the system to be dependent on up-to-date local plans that are reviewed regularly. Lewes has fallen behind the programme for updating its local plan, partly because of lack of resources, I think, and partly because of COVID, because the strategic plan was back in 2016 and it didn't start reviewing that until the last couple of years. The Part 2 plan was, if you like, filling in the gaps in the Part 1 plan of 2016, which was the strategic plan, which counts as the local plan. So it's about 3 or 4 years behind, but as I say, COVID hasn't helped. It's meant that a lot of authorities have had their local plan programme delayed beyond the limit which the government find acceptable. But the principal amendments are there on page 7 in Part 2. The Lewes will still be under some penalties. At 2.7 it mentions about a 20% buffer extra housing that they need to provide if they're behind in their 5-year delivery. But that's been taken away, but there's still some penalties to apply, a 5% penalty, I think. The local plan, the main thing is that the neighbourhood plan, the previous policy said that when it's over 2 years old, its main policies would be considered out of date, and that has meant that it's been difficult for the authority to fight the appeals, the regular appeals that there have been, particularly over the last year. But now that, in response to objections from all over the country, now the neighbourhood plans will not be considered out of date until they're more than 5 years old, so their policies will carry more weight. But that hasn't helped us on the appeals that we fought through the year, because provisions only came into effect just before Christmas. There's various other amendments referred to on page 8. Which are sort of explain themselves. The amendments acknowledge that you can't always have high density residential development just to make up a shortfall in provision, that it does depend on the character of the area. So that's something that's been acknowledged at least. But basically although the government are trying to relax some of the harsher provisions in response to the particularly objections from members, MPs in the South East, who think they've been particularly impacted by the need to find more housing. The target for 300,000 houses has still not been reduced, so it'll still be very difficult for authorities, particularly in the South East, where developers want to concentrate their development because it's a sort of a very large hotspot as far as the country is concerned. It'll still be difficult to resist speculative development in those areas for areas for districts like Lewis, which will still have great difficulty even in getting a 4-year supply, which is mentioned in the amendments, because they've only in the past managed to achieve on average a 3-year supply. Unless there's anything particular that members want to raise, I've just set out the main provisions there for noting.
Councillor Buchanan.
Thank you, Chair. Item 2.60, 216.
Yeah.
Paragraph 160, which I haven't read, requires local plans to set out ways in which renewable and low carbon energy supply will be increased. It says it will not apply to local plans that have reached or will reach regulator in the 19th stage within 3 months of the 5th of September 2003. Presumably the Lewis one, the not doesn't apply to that.
We've reached Regulation 18 stage. Regulation 19 is the draft plan for submission. We're at Regulation 18 stage at the moment, so it's still too late. Even if we at Regulation 19 stage, it's still too late to avoid that, which means that it will require the local authority to set out ways in which renewable or low carbon energy supply will be increased. But I think that's something that Lewis is included in there.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I read that.
So it's in a way superfluous, because I think that as far as that goes, LDC will comply, because there's quite a substantial part of the consultation paper given over to renewable low carbon energy policies and strategic policies. It's the second policy that's mentioned. The first strategic policy is on housing. The second one is on renewable and low carbon energy matters.
Okay.
Councillor Bournemouth.
Yeah, it's just great to see that our neighbourhood plan is actually going to have that higher amount of weight put onto it, with, again, to try and keep out some of these developments we don't want or need in the town. So that's great to see. Also just want to say thank you to Jeff for condensing all the changes that are relevant to us in the local district council down into a simplified report for us. So thank you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've included everything.
Thank you. Anybody else? So can I have a show of hands to note the report, please? That's noted. Thank you. Agenda item 7, to notify the committee of decisions taken by Lewis District Council on applications previously considered by this committee, and you're asked to note the report unless you've got any questions.
Very few applications, very few decisions because of the Christmas and New Year period. So there's only the 3 there to note, and nothing significant really. I think we raised a few concerns about Elm Court. We always had a few concerns about the design of Elm Court, but these changes we thought were, I think, an improvement overall. So that got through anyway. The other 2 relatively minor applications.
Councillor Hannigan.
I know the appeal was only on the middle of December. When are we expecting to
Any time now.
Oh, could it be that soon?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the decision for
What's that to?
Florence House.
Residential care home.
Florence House, yeah,
In the-
yeah.
in the-
Been so many appeals in the last year.
That's the one you're interested in. So it could be any time though.
Yeah, well, they tried to keep inspectors tried to keep to a 4-week deadline, although Christmas and New Year
Yeah, it would take a
intervened.
week off anyway, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, inspectors are quite conscientious. I think even with Christmas and New Year intervening, you know, they will still want to try and keep to a sort of 4 to 6 week sort of a deadline. So, it's been a month less 1 day since the hearing on the 12th of December, so we should expect it before the next meeting.
The next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Any other questions? So can I show of hands so we know the report? Thank you, Noted. And that concludes the meeting at 8:05.
Thank you.